Joe Bonsall is a member of the Oak Ridge Boys vocal group. He supplies the tenor part of their distinctive four-part harmony, and he was born in Philadelphia. Joe, the group's been around for about 30 years now. At least you've been in the group about 30 years. Is there a theme in your music that holds it all together?
Well, you know, the Oak Ridge Boys have a background in Southern-style gospel quartet music. That's where it all began for all of us. And although the four guys that are in the group, Dwayne Allen, myself, William Lee Golden, and Richard Sturban, we're kind of from four different parts of the country. You know, William Lee Golden's from Alabama, Dwayne's from Texas, and Richard's from Camden. Richard was born and raised in Camden, New Jersey, right across the river, actually, from me in Philadelphia. In fact, when I was 15, I met Richard. And so we go back a long, long ways now, and we've been singing together, obviously, now for the 30-plus years I've been with the group, 30 years and a few months, I guess.
When you met each other at 15, did you have any idea you'd be together in a group someday?
No, not really, but see, when I had a very unique time growing up in Philadelphia. Now, Philly was, as you know, the cradle of rock and roll. I mean, so much great rock and roll started there. And, you know, American Bandstand was there, you know, Fabian, Frankie Avalon, all the South Philly kids were having hit records. You know, you had the great doo-wop groups down on South Street singing. So I grew up and then, of course, Elvis was coming on at the same time. So I had this incredible background of Philadelphia music when I was very young and impressionable, and I loved every single bit of it.
Pioneering days of rock and roll.
I loved it, man. I was so thrilled to have grown up in Philadelphia and been a part of all that. In fact, just to fast forward a hair, I'm in the Philadelphia Music Hall of Fame, right? And I can't even believe that I look here at Chubby Checker and Freddie Boom Boom Cannon and the Stylistics, you know, and Hall & Oates and the early DJs that I listened to when I was a kid, High Lit, Joe Niagara and Jerry Blavat, the Geeter with the heater, you know?
Yep.
All these guys, man, are there, and I'm in the Hall of Fame with them. It's kind of mind-boggling to me, but a unique thing happened to me when I was 13, 14, 15 years old. The Beatles came. And I have to admit that I appreciate the Beatles now for what they did and what they have done and the impact they've had on music. But when I was a young kid in 10th grade in high school, I hated them. I hated all the British groups.
Why? Why?
I just didn't like them. For one thing, all the girls screaming at them. I thought it was like the end of Elvis Presley or the end of real rock and roll. I just didn't like their sound. I didn't like their look. I thought if that little Henry VIII guy sang that song one more time, I would put a contract out on him. I just hated these people. And it was amazing to me that during that important time in my life, it was a very pivotal time because, you know, we're all kind of finding ourselves at the subhuman age of 14, 15. When you read my book, G.I. Joe and Lily, you'll see my father even had a stroke at 15. So I found Southern-style gospel. Some young kids at church said, you want to hear something cool? You need to hear these gospel groups from the South sing. And there was a group out of Harrisburg, Pennsylvania called the Couriers. And the Couriers Quartet would bring up these other Southern-style groups to places like Ardmore, Pennsylvania, Souderton, Pennsylvania. Put on these gospel shows. They would bring up the old Oak Ridge Boys, because the Oak Ridge Boys have been around since 45.
Right.
You know. They would bring up groups like the Blackwood Brothers and the Statesmen and the Spear family and the Happy Goodman family and all these Southern gospel groups that most people around Philly, I don't think, knew who they were. Well, I got into it big time. I thought these gospel quartets were the coolest thing I ever heard. I made up my mind at 15 years old, I want to sing in a group. Well,
Could you put your finger on why you liked it so much, Joe?
The power of the singing. See, I liked harmony. You know, the old doo-wop groups singing harmony, I loved harmony. You know, me and my compadres, like everybody else that grew in Philly, used to go down to the subway, you know, and sing in the L station there, like right there at the Tioga Street L stop, man, at Kensington and not K&A, there was an L stop there too, but down at Kensington and Tioga, we used to go down there, and you know, a lot of people.
Good acoustics in the subway?
Yes, it smelled bad, because a lot of the, you know, the bums and stuff would use they would sleep in there and use it, you know. So we call them homeless now, I guess, but when I was a kid, we called them bums. But we get down there, and if
they didn't get in your way of enjoying that
music.
music.
Man, they would lay over there, and they seemed to enjoy it actually. But you know, I love the harmony. Is the point. Well, man, I went to Harrisburg, Pennsylvania one day to the Farm Show Arena. The Couriers put on this big, gigantic spring gospel show there, and there was a group called the Keystone Quartet. Richard Sturban was singing bass with the Keystone Quartet. See, I was 15, so he would have been about 19. And I went back, I met all these guys, and he's a young guy singing bass. I thought he was really cool. And found out that he was going to this voice teacher named Aunt Betty in northeastern Philadelphia, and she was teaching him how to sing. Well, man, I went home and signed up for voice lessons with Aunt Betty. And I'd go down there and talk to Richard at voice lessons. And then he sold men's clothes at Gimbel's. in the northeastern Philly. So I used to go up there and follow him around Gimbels and talk gospel quartets. I didn't know anybody else that even knew who the Statesmen were. But Richard knew, so I used to go follow him around. Well, to make that long story a whole lot shorter, Richard's Keystone Quartet went full time. They bought this old rickety bus and decided they're going to go across the country singing in churches. I was working for Jack Frost Sugar at the time in Philly. And I was working in the sales department. I'd worked my way up from the mailroom for the National Sugar Refining Company. It was Jack Frost and Domino Sugar, had a big refinery down on Delaware Avenue, and the offices were in the Roman Haas building at 5th and Market. Third floor was Jack Frost. I eventually worked my way to the sales order.
And you were about how old at the time, Joe?
Then I'm out of high school now, and I'm looking at about almost 19.
Do you know what you're going to do with your life at that point?
Oh yeah, I'm going to sing. Didn't matter to me. National Sugar Company wanted to even put me through school, which was amazing because I couldn't afford college, and I never went to college. So.
You saw making a career out of it.
Yeah, man, I wanted to sing. So I knew sugar wasn't where I was going to be, and it's a good thing. There is no Domino Sugar today, but there's still an Oak Ridge Boys. Well, anyway, man, Richard's little group went full time, and they called me up and asked me if I wanted to go sing with them. So I joined the Keystone Quartet. I had my own little part-time gospel group called the Faith Four. We were horrible. My sister even sang with us, my sister Nancy. We would sing together, and it was a funny group. And my mother, Lily, bless her heart, she bought us car after car to travel in, or she signed for them, signed for a van. I mean, she just tried to help us out as much as she could. My mother always encouraged us. But I joined up with Richard, and we sang full time and starved to death, and we eventually moved the group to Buffalo, New York. I'm still not sure why. But we lived in Buffalo for about 5 years. Richard had 3 little boys. He couldn't hack it no more. We were starving to death, man. Just, we weren't making any money at all. And the J.D. Sumner and the Stamps Quartet, who is backing up Elvis Presley on the big Elvis tour now in the early 70s, hired Richard to come sing bass with them. Richard left me, went there and sang. I kept that little Keystone group going as a little more of a rock band, a rock gospel group than a gospel quartet, because I didn't have a bass singer anymore and I couldn't find one. So we sang trio, and I hired a bunch of musicians, and that was during the Jesus rock days, one way, Christ man, you know. So I was into that, and we sang like that for a long time, and I got to know the Oak Ridge Boys. Dwayne Allen and William Lee Golden were in the Oak Ridge Boys. And I would book the Oak Ridge Boys all up north, Buffalo, Jamestown, Elmira, Hamilton, Ontario. I would book gospel.
Oh, that was your job to book the group?
I would start to book concerts the way the Couriers used to bring up the southern groups. I did it in New York State and Canada. And, you know, the concerts kind of broke even, but the good news, I got to become real good friends with Dwayne Allen and William Lee Golden. In 1972, the Oak Ridge Boys asked Richard if he would join the group. Their longtime bass singer at the time, Noel Fox, was tired of the road. He got off the road. The Oaks were kind of a premier gospel group at that time. Very cutting edge. Not like the other gospel quartets. Man, they grew their hair long. They had a rock and roll kind of band behind them. They were really pretty cutting edge. And all the old quartets dressed alike. The Oaks didn't dress alike. So they were really cool. I love the Oak Ridge Boys. And a year later, 73, they offered me the job. And there I am back with Richard. And we've been singing together ever since. I'll be 56 years old. Richard will be 61 this spring. And so we're still together and we're still singing. It's a unique thing. I just wrote a new book on the Oak Ridge Boys. It's called The Oak Ridge Boys: An American Journey. It comes out next fall. It's more of a coffee table book than it is.
Lots of photos, you mean?
A lot of photos. And I write what I call an anecdotal narrative text to the book. And instead of touching on every aspect of the Oak Ridge Boys' career, I try to let the reader know where we came from, how we got here, and maybe in so doing answer the question why we are here. And I have a chapter called 1 in a Million, based on one of our songs called 1 in a Million, and it tells some of the story that I've been sharing with you. And I maintain that you could grab 1 million guys and keep pulling 4 guys out of there and put them up behind the microphones until the Lord comes, and you're not going to get an Oak Ridge Boys. The river here runs really deep. The story about me and my Camden buddy Richard Sturban is a prime example of how deep the river runs in our group today. And I think that's one of the reasons why we're probably still singing today, because just how deep the relationships go.
Now, I understand you got your start in writing. Now, we've already talked about that
Right.
for a few minutes now. In the 1980s, somebody asked you to write about the history, or at least about some experiences that the Oak Ridge Boys were having on the road, and then it seemed that your aptitude for writing was noticed, and that's when it started?
Yeah, I think so. It was kind of like in the middle 80s, and I had only ever written one article. I wrote an article called Daydream, and Country Music Magazine published it back in about 1983. And it was a little article about the Philadelphia Phillies and how much I loved the Phillies when I was a kid. and how my father, being disabled like he was in later years, how I was able to take him to the Phillies games, and how the Phillies even opened up their locker room one day to my father. And I took him in there to the locker room, and he met all the Phillies. That's when they were Greg Lazinski and Mike Schmidt and the 1980 World Series championship team, basically. And Ron Reed was a relief pitcher there that I've become friends with, and we're still friends today. And Big Ron Reed, the big left-hander, he's the one that worked all this out. And till the day my father passed away, he had Ron Reed's baseball glove right there by his bed. It never left his bedside. So that was the first thing I wrote, this little article called Daydream, where I talked about going to Connie Mack Stadium with my father as a child, and then years later taking him back to see the Phillies and how much.
The full circle.
Yeah, and how meaningful it was. Very, very nice article, as I recall. I've got to dig that out sometime. I haven't looked at it in a long time. But then a few years later, I was asked to write a diary by the same magazine. It was Country Music Magazine at the time. They said, the Oak Ridge Boys were going on a West Coast trip, and said, why don't you write a daily diary of what goes on in the life of the Oak Ridge Boys? Well, I wrote this little humorous, anecdotal type diary of the Oak Ridge Boys, and it came out real good. It was funny. There was a lot of funny stuff in it. And they printed that. Well, then, a little bit later on, with the advent of the internet and laptop computers, you can't take a big typewriter on the road with you, but you can take a laptop. When I started really getting into technology in the late 80s, and I had my own laptop, I wrote a series of children's books called the Molly the Cat books. We had just got this new cat at home, and I thought this cat was just the most wonderful little kitty. And I was sitting in my hotel room in Las Vegas, and I wrote, Molly was 2 years old, although she still looks somewhat like a kitten. It's just that she never grew very big. Molly felt that it had something to do with her beginnings. Not that she remembered much about them. However, she sometimes dreamed about the night that a young male human cat picked her up out of the rain and brought her to the home and to Mother Mary.
Now, when you wrote these thoughts down, did you have it in your mind that you were writing for kids at that time, or are you just getting the thoughts out on paper?
I was just going to write about my cat. I didn't know it was going to be a series. Well,
did somebody read it and say, this would be great for a kid's book?
Yes. What I eventually did was wrote a whole long story and involved all the cats. I tried to look at them as if they could talk. Leaving out some things, because I know, some of my cats just, as much as I love little Molly to this day, and she's like 12 or 13 now, she looks at me like with disdain when I come home. Oh God, he's home. But that's cats. But yes, I wrote this manuscript that to me read like a Disney screenplay. And Ideal's children's books eventually got a hold of the manuscript, and they loved it. And they said, we see this as a series. Can you break it down for us and make it a series? Well, I guess I can, so I gave it a shot. And it came out actually in 4 books. It was Molly, the Home, Outside, and Brewster by Joseph S. Bonsall, illustrated by Erin Marie Morterer, a very talented young girl from New Jersey who did all the illustrations. And the books were pretty successful. They really were. And that really whet my appetite for doing more writing. Well, then, as I say, the internet got there. So oakridgeboys.com started becoming an entity. So I started writing content for oakridgeboys.com. And then I found myself writing commentaries. And now that I have my own...
Commentaries?
Oh, yeah, man.
For the Oak Ridge website?
I started writing some for the Oak Ridge Boys website and eventually branched it on out into my own website.
What kind of commentary, Joe? What were you writing about?
Oh, lots of different things. Politics, the war. When you have your own website, man, you can blog, you can kind of like write what you want and put it out there. And my website is josephsbonsall.com. And I have commentaries, other writings. Sometimes I'll just go off on a little tangent. Last year I was at my farm and there was this little crippled barn swallow. And I wrote this whole little story based on this barn swallow and how maybe next year when the swallows come back, maybe I'll recognize him. I think I was out of my mind actually when I wrote that. But, I write whatever I feel and it just feels good to do so, if a creative thought
You have your laptop with you. It's convenient too.
It is. It really is. See, I enjoy the creative process. In fact, on my website right now I have a piece called My Theory of Creativity, okay? But I just adore the creative website, the creative process website, creative process. That, whether it's a song, whether it's a story, a book, whether it's a redesigned kitchen countertop, something that is not here today, but tomorrow it's there and it's viable because you used a little ingenuity and took a little time to listen and open yourself up to some little fountain or spigot that comes on. Most people ignore this stuff. I think everybody has it, but most people ignore it. If that little spigot comes on and you get an idea, man, how cool.
Takes some discipline to write it down.
It does. I wrote a song for the Oak Ridge Boys this year. I don't write many songs. I don't think I'm that good at it. But when I do write one, it's usually pretty meaningful. I wrote a song called The Journey. And I was out at my farm all by myself. I'd been working on trying to write a bluegrass, mountain feeling sounding gospel song. I wasn't getting anywhere with it. I picked up this little instrument that I bought called a McNally strum stick. It's based on a dulcimer. It's easy to play. Anybody can play it. In fact, the ad at McNallystrumstick.com says, strumstick.com will tell you there are no wrong notes on the strum stick. That's not exactly right. But I picked this thing up one day out there at the farm, and I was looking at, quite honestly, at a picture of my parents. And I thought to myself, Mom, Dad, how you doing? What's going on? You guys okay, And I got to thinking about the fact that as you get older, one of the things about getting older is you start losing people. I've been to too many funerals in the last year. Even younger guys that I've known. A great songwriter in Nashville named Randy Van Warmer we just buried. 49 years old. A year ago he was fine. I said, you've got leukemia, and boom, he ain't here all of a sudden. Another good friend of mine, he's my own age, bass player, played with the Oaks for a couple years. All of a sudden he wasn't feeling good, man. It's feeling funny. Went to the doctor. There's a couple ways you can go. Well, it's just myelanta. Or, sorry, but you have a mass in your liver and you won't be here next year. Stuff we got to deal with. I guess death is part of life. We all. In fact, the Oaks just recorded a song called you May Not Want to Go Home, but You Can't Stay Here. So, well, man, I got to thinking of all of this. I was waxing a little reflective, and I wrote a song called The Journey. And it's a song that talks about death and dying and the possible journey you can take and the possible promise thereafter. And it came out really cool. I played it for the guys, and they went, oh my gosh, that's cool. And we just recorded it. And now next August, September, when our new album comes out, they're even going to call the new CD The Journey. This song's on there. Next thing you know, people will be buying this and listening to it. And it all happened because that morning I was looking at a picture of my parents, and a little idea turned on, and I started working and writing and strumming on that goofy little instrument called a strum stick. And that is the creative process.
Did you ultimately record that goofy little instrument?
I did. I put a lead.
That's where the inspiration started, right?
Yeah, I with our producer, Dwayne Allen, our lead singer, co-produces with Michael Sykes in Nashville. And when we put together this new acoustic-driven CD of the Oak Ridge Boys, I said, please, you got to let me put this strum stick on there. He said, sure, man, do it. It was on the demo. I had demoed it. And so there's one turnaround where I play this little strum stick on the cut. And yeah, it all makes sense. It came full circle for me. But the creative process, man, is just a wonderful thing. And I really think everybody has it. I think everybody has the capacity to create. Again, like I say, I don't care if it's a new redesigned bathroom. It's something here today that wasn't here yesterday, and you did it. I like that.
How long does it take to make an Oak Ridge Boys record? Is it something that just comes together on its own over a period of months or even years? Or are you on deadline to produce a certain amount of material?
It's never really a set deadline. We all seem to kind of know when it's time to record again, and we get an idea. Our last 3 albums have been kind of theme albums. Several years ago, we recorded a gospel quartet album to pay tribute to our roots that I was just talking about. All the guys love Southern gospel. So let's do a gospel album. We hadn't done one in like 25 years. So we recorded this album called From the Heart. It was all of a sudden, it was up for a Grammy. It won a Gospel Music Association Dove Award as Best Country Gospel Album, and it was a way for us to retrace our roots. We found some great new gospel songs, picked a few old ones that we liked, and went in and cut this album. It was a cool thing. The next theme was a new Christmas CD. Oak Ridge Boys are big on Christmas. We've got more Christmas albums out than Andy Williams. And
that's saying something.
It is. Well, we have 4. But there was this new song we heard called An Inconvenient Christmas. It usually starts with getting turned on by a piece of music. Inconvenient Christmas was a cool song written by this guy named Kyle Matthews. In fact, I've written a book based on this song that I think is going to come out this Christmas. And what a cool song, we thought. Well, then we heard a couple other cool songs. So that started us thinking,
Now, what's inconvenient about that Christmas? I'm intrigued.
The Inconvenient Christmas talks about the fact that you may think that everything is caving in on you at Christmas time, that everything's so tough and everything's so hard with the shopping and trying to get it all done. But the most inconvenient Christmas ever was the first one. Okay, when Mary came so far, and when Christ came down as an infant. The most inconvenient Christmas was the first one. That's the message of the song. And the most inconvenient Christmas ever was the first. Okay, A young girl expects a child she can't explain, forced to walk 100 miles just to give birth in the hay, while the king with all his power, while the king in that same hour feeling challenged by his power was sending his troops to wipe them all out. Now, so you think you've got an inconvenient Christmas? That's a cute song. Well, we do a Christmas tour every year, about a 25, 30-day Christmas tour, wherein we do a little bit of regular Oak Ridge Boy music, but a whole 90-minute Christmas show, complete with sets, props, everything. It's fun. And
Well, the band is on the road a lot. Is the band on the road just about year-round?
all year round. We take breaks through the year. We don't say like take 3 months off and then tour.
How do you find time to record?
Well, you got to make the time. You got to build it into the schedule when you're us. Because like I said, we'll do 170 dates this year. We did last year, and the new Christmas album provided us some new material to do a new Christmas show, so that helped. Then our next album, we wanted to do a patriotic flavored album, not just patriotic, but some great songs that reflect Middle America, and. So we recorded the Color CD, which has a lot of those kind of songs on it. Songs about family, friendship, hometown, God, country, soldiers, flag, sacrifice, you know. And in fact, the song G.I. Joe and Lily was then recorded by the Oak Ridge Boys. And now we've just finished wrapping up this new album for this year, which is this acoustic-driven, bluegrass-flavored album that looks like it's tentatively called The Journey on Spring Hill Music. And we found some great songs, just some great songs. I wrote the one song, The Journey, but boy, we have a bunch of really cool songs and some real cool bluegrass. Folks are going to hear some different sounds out of the Oak Ridge Boys. I've even been learning how to play the banjo, man.
Now, we've talked about your writing, and G.I. Joe and Lily has come up at least a couple times. That's the name of a book you wrote, and you also, as you said a minute ago, that's a song that the Oaks recorded.
Right.
And the whole idea for that started somewhere in Pennsylvania. It was Lancaster, where you were going to play a gig at the American Music Theater,
Right.
recently built back in the late 90s. And you were inspired by the sight of some veterans, and that's where it started. Tell us the rest.
That's right. In fact, the prologue of G.I. Joe and Lily begins with this particular show that you're talking about, Larry, the show in American Music Theater. We had invited 40 Tom Ridge was the governor here then, before he became, the Secretary of National Security, and Homeland Security, I guess it is. And he had proclaimed this particular week Honor Veterans Week. Well, they had just built the American Music Theater, as you say, and we were booked there. And it's right there on Route 30 outside of Lancaster. And we've played there since, of course. But that night, we had 40 veterans come to the show, including my parents. My parents at that point were living in what my mother called the Soldiers' Home. They spent their last year and a half to 2 years living there at the Southeastern Pennsylvania Veterans Center in Spring City, right by Royersford, Pennsylvania, about 35, 40 minutes out of Philly. And as I talk about in the book, which is based on their lives, G.I. Joe and Lily.
But that's not apparent. I looked at the book. I read the first few chapters, at least for now, in preparation for the interview, and it was not apparent to me that it was your parents. It seemed you withheld that information until the end of the book.
Till the epilogue. I wrote the book in third person. People don't find out till the end that the son Joey, who is on the very peripheral of the story, is also your author. I wanted to make sure the book was about them and not about me. And I felt like writing it in third person was the best way to do that. So I talk about in the book that G.I. Joe and Lily were amongst the veterans that night in Lancaster. And I wrote a song in their honor. What really happened was that, but I knew my parents were going to be there. And on the way to the show, the night before on the bus, I sat in the back of the bus and I wrote this song. Just to show you how often I write a song, that's the last one I wrote before I wrote The Journey. So that's 4 years ago, 99, almost 5 years ago. So I got backstage and I played the song for the guys. I said, here's a song. I wrote it for my parents. What do you think? They said, man, it's pretty cool. I said, do you mind if I sing it tonight? Just go out there and sing it for them. They said, no, man, do it. It's great. So I worked it out with our guitar player, Donnie Carr. And that night, I mentioned that we had 40 veterans here from the Southeastern Pennsylvania Veterans Center. And as I started to say, Tom Ridge had declared that, Honor Veterans Week. They got a big applaud. I said, here's a little song that I've written for my parents tonight who are among them. And I sang this little song, G.I. Joe and Lily. Man, this song ended and spotlights hit them. They're sitting there in their matching wheelchairs, man. They were sweet as can be. And she kissed him, and all the veterans applauded, and we're hitting them on the back. Veterans from World War II, Korea, Vietnam, all there together. And it was a wonderful, wonderful night. And what I did after that night, sometime over the course of the next 6 months, I wrote a short story based on the song G.I. Joe and Lily as an outline. And I thought it would end up being in a bowl of chicken soup for a veteran's soul or something like that. And Kathy Harris had a lot of vision for this. Kathy's the head of marketing for Oak Ridge Boys, and she acted as my book agent on this. So we got to get this out. It's so cool. The cool thing from my standpoint, my mother and father got to hear the song. My father didn't understand much near the end, but my mother did get to see the short story. She still wondered, though, where was her book? Because my mother always wanted me to write a book about her and Daddy, always. I say it in the epilogue. Mom always wanted me to write a book about them. I finally did. It's just a shame they're not here to see it. But that's when I say in the end of the book, if you've stuck with me this far, you may have already realized that the son Joey is your author, okay? And I say in there that I'm proud to say that my parents were Private First Class Joseph S. Bonsall Sr., U.S. Army, and Corporal Lily Maud Collins Bonsall of the Women's Army Corps. Okay. But Mom always wanted a story written. Well, she loved the short story. Well, over the next year or so, they passed away, him first and then her. And that's chronicled pretty well in the book. I follow their story in the book pretty much from the time that he runs away from an abusive home in Philadelphia to join the Army and be among the first to land at D-Day. And I follow her story as a young woman who runs away from a farm in North Carolina, and joins the Women's Army Corps after working at a defense plant in Michigan for a year. And how their paths, him fighting the war and her eventually escorting wounded, how they finally meet at Mitchell Field.
They both wanted to get away from something.
Yeah, they did. And I write about this in the book in G.I. Joe and Lily too, because I was always amazed at the fact my father's family was easy to figure out. They were like a bunch of drunk losers, to be real honest. I mean, his parents and his brothers, and they just were not pleasant people, the Bonsall side of my family. On my mother's side, they were both Irish immigrant farmers, but they just ran everything with such an iron fist. Not so much my mother's mother, but the father. And there was 11 of them. So, I might have got that wrong. I think it was 9. My mother was the 9th of 9, or was the 11th of 11? God, I forgot. I got to read my own book.
That's a handful.
It's still a handful. And my mother ran away to get away from that hard farm work that she felt like she wasn't appreciated. She ended up in Michigan and ended up again joining the WACs. During the war, she was moved by the war effort and the soldiers. But what happened here was, after they passed away, New Leaf Press got a hold of this manuscript. And they liked it a lot. And they said, can you make it a little bigger? So I expanded the manuscript, figuring it would be a bigger short story, maybe a gift book. And by then, the Oak Ridge Boys recorded G.I. Joe and Lily for the Colors Project. So now I've got an Oaks version of G.I. Joe and Lily. How that came down is really ironic and, So I wrote it a little bigger and turned it in, and they called me in for a meeting. And I was thinking they were going to put out this little gift book with a little CD of the Oaks singing G.I. Joe and Lily.
Yeah.
They called me in and said, look, this is a great story, man. It's faith, it's family, it's war, it's romance, it's everything. It's what Middle America is. And we think people would enjoy reading a whole story about this. Can you give us the whole book? So I said, well, man, that would be a great thing to be able to do. Thank you for the opportunity. And over the next 2 months, I just immersed myself in writing the book. I wrote the whole book on the road. I wrote the whole book on the road.
Well, Joe, what was your method of operation for gathering all that information now? We already know you're fond of the creative process. What'd you do, sit down with your parents one at a time and interview them?
No, they were gone. I couldn't
How
do
did you
that.
have all this information from memory, Joe? I was trying to get those dates straight in my mind. They were gone by the time you wrote.
Yes. So here's what worked out very nicely for me. 2 things. First of all, my sister saved tons of stuff. I remembered, from the time I was like at an age to remember, and when my father had the stroke, and from then on, that was a piece of cake. But those young years, what I really wanted to concentrate on was this 19-year-old Philly street kid fighting at Utah Beach and beyond. I wanted to talk about a young kid, not quite 19, who won a Silver Star and a Bronze Star and a Purple Heart with 2 oak leaf clusters. What made him go? How did it happen? I got all his war records. I had my mother and father's tax returns from their early marriage. I knew a lot from what my mother told me because my mother and I were very close, and I remembered a lot.
Any personal letters?
My mother also left me 50 pages of handwritten memoirs on long leaf paper written by her, which she hoped would someday be a book about her and Daddy. And she wrote explicitly about their young days.
She was so right. How could she have known?
I don't know, man, because she
Be
was
that
amazing.
determined, and that's the dream that came true.
Now, I could have probably written the book without her memoirs, but I got to tell you, it really put the final touch on for me because it was my outline then. It's what I had to go on. And I was able to write the story and write all through their younger part. And the cool thing is so many wonderful old veterans who have read this book have responded to me in such a positive way, including the 90th Infantry Division. See, my father was with the 359th Division of the 90th Infantry. Okay, and right before D-Day, the 359th was assigned to the 4th Army, and the 4th Army was the first wave at Utah Beach. Utah Beach wasn't quite as bad as Omaha Beach, but it was no picnic either. The Big Red One was over here really getting their tail kicked by the Germans on Omaha Beach. My father landed at Utah, though. My father only talked to me about the war one time ever, and I write about this pretty explicitly in the book. It's a very unique chapter, and that the young son, finally, after cajoling his father and begging what the medals are up there under the socks, what happened? What's the deal?
What do they mean?
I've heard the nightmares. I've seen the operations for shrapnel removal. And he had those operations from the time he came home from that war till the time he passed away at 75 years old. They were still taking shrapnel out of the man's body. What happened, Daddy? He never told me about St. Lo and how the lieutenant's head was blown off and landed at his feet. And it upset him enough where he snapped and went and took out 2 machine gun nests by himself, woke up in a hospital after taking incredible fragmentation of wounds, woke up in a hospital with the Silver Star and the Purple Heart pinned to his pillow. They didn't tell me about that, but he told me some about landing at Utah Beach in D-Day. Told me some about that. But what he did tell me, and I write about this pretty explicitly in the book, is he put his arm around my shoulder and said, I'm going to tell you something, son. You'll never go. You'll never see this hell. They'll take me first. They'll fight me to the death. Because you see, they want you when you're young because you're stupid. An older man would have never been in that situation. So they're not taking you. There'll be another war because there's always another war. My father was very prolific also in 2 counts. Vietnam came next. My father, when I was 15 and he was 39, had a piece of shrapnel lodge in his neck. Cut off the blood flow to the cardioid artery. I don't know if I pronounced that right.
Carotid. Close
Thank
enough.
you, sir. I knew it was, well, it didn't come out right. Carotid artery. Permanent brain damage, stroke. Permanently disabled for the rest of his life. My mother looked after him for the rest of her life. And I write pretty explicitly again in G.I. Joe and Lily about the day at the draft board when my mother and I sat there on Kensington Avenue in Philadelphia and she said, I need this boy home. He's sole support. He's all I got. And that guy said, Silver Star, Bronze Star, Purple Heart with 2 oak leaf clusters, 4 years in the wax, escorting wounded home. Bonsall family's given enough, 3A. And I didn't go to Vietnam. And I didn't go to Vietnam because he said I wouldn't. That's pretty incredible, you know, because my father said, you won't go. They'll take me first. It might not have been the way he planned, but he kept his promise, didn't he? I think it's one of the greatest parts of the book to me, personally. Now, people may find other things in the book that are maybe more rewarding to them in the story. But for me, the guy that wrote the book, and knowing in my heart I'm writing about my mom and dad, my father doing that day, I never forgot it. It took up a good 3 pages in the book of pretty important part of it to me personally, was that. And then the rest of the book's really then about my mother, because it was my mother who was the incredible inspiration. I mean, Lily was an incredible woman, patriotic woman, loved this country, loved the flag. Love those soldiers, man. My mother saw the war close up when she saw these guys coming home. And I write this in the book, and I really believe it to be true. I know she fell in love with my father head over heels, first sight. And they got married 6 days after they met. And it's a wonderful romantic story. But I got to tell you, I always believe my mother married them all when she married him. I think she married every single soldier she met.
Well, Joe,
sorry, man.
that's
Talking
all
about
right.
my mother is heavy to me because, especially, you know, we're here in Pennsylvania, man. This is home. I mean, this ain't like, this isn't just, you know, talking anywhere else. And very few people have given me an opportunity to talk this much about the book and about her. But let's tell you one more thing about my mother. It's really cool. My mother always supported me and my sister. She used to tell me, man, you could be anything you want to be. You want to go sing, Joey? Go sing. But do it the best you can every single time. Get up and sing no matter where they say get up and sing. You get up and sing. She used to tell me how every little stone, every time I sang would mean something to later on in my life. And she'd say, this is America. And you can be anything you want to be if you're willing to work hard. She had the rules. Work hard, tell the truth. Always be honest. It was a big thing with her. Be willing to sacrifice and give it everything you've got all the time. And then she'd always point at him over there in his bed in the living room or something, and she'd say, that's what guys like, that's why they did what they did. That's why your daddy did that. That's why he is like he is today. So don't you blow it. Hey man, I bought into her philosophy from a young age, and to this day, I don't think I would be anything if not for my mother.
Well, the Oaks road schedule is so arduous, so you'd have to have some kind of philosophy to keep yourself energized, and it sounds like your mom is helping with that.
She always has, and that's not a problem to be energized for this group, especially at this time in our lives, I think. It's easier for us now than it used to be.
Is so?
We're the older guys on the block. We've got these great things happening, you know, like Dwayne Allen's producing, man, and he's still so into the music and into keeping this group alive.
All of a sudden, I feel a wave of energy from you. We get back to the Oaks.
Well, you know, Richard Sturban is a solid rock kind of a guy, honest man, always looking at the bottom line and conservative in his thinking and keeps everything on an even keel. William Lee Golden's a dreamer. He's an artist. He's a painter, and he's got this quiet leadership about him. Myself, I've got things like this book, G.I. Joe and Lily, and a little bit of songwriting and my other little writing that I do, as well as providing the energy and hopefully some common sense from time to time to the group. We're a group of leaders, all with the capacity to follow. And that's very cool. The egos are checked at the door. I may have a great idea, but Dwayne might have a better one. Well, hey, let's go with the better one. So at this point in time in our career, I don't know, man. I think we're at a good place. We're the older guys on the block. We're feeling good. We're singing good, and I think that's important because if we weren't still singing well, I wouldn't want to do it. I don't want to look like an oldies act up there that just doesn't have the pipes anymore.
How do you maintain those pipes, Joe?
That's a blessing. It's God blessing you with good health. It really is. I don't know what else to say. We came off stage last night in Clarksville, and a longtime friend of mine came up to me in Tennessee, did this show I talked about for the 101st. How do you guys sing that good? Now, I say this in humility, man. We've been around a long time. I could talk about it. Singing's what we do. How do you guys at your age still sing like stronger than ever? You know, I don't know that I have the answer. We try to take care of ourselves, you know. Nobody does anything stupid. You know, there's like no drugs, no alcohol. I mean, the guys we're pretty clean bunch here. We're your vanilla all-American guys here, but it's more than that. It's a blessing. It's good health, and I wouldn't want to be out there singing if we looked like a bunch of old, out-of-breath old guys. I really wouldn't. I think we owe the people that come to hear us more than that. But the fact that we are singing good and feeling good, and all the guys have all these cool things going on. Like again, me with the book, and you know, the Golden with his painting. I mean, we've just got a lot of energy going on, even at our age. So to me,
do you look at tapes of yourself and go, "We're doing all right still"?
Sometimes. It's really evident in the new music we've recorded. I think over the last couple of years, these 3 projects on Spring Hill, and this new one that's coming out. I think we're going to turn some heads and move some people with this project. I mean, we're singing our tails off here, and we're into it. We're enjoying it. So. Yeah, it's nice to come home. We all love our families. I love being with my family. That's the eternal sacrifice that my mother talked about. One of the great sacrifices being with the Oak Ridge Boys is I didn't spend near enough time with my mother as I would have liked to in her older age and everything, you know. And time with our children. I've missed a lot of stuff with our kids growing up. Now I've got grandkids that I don't see as often as I'd like. There's a sacrifice. There's a price to pay for everything, though. Anything that's worth doing, there's always a price. My mother taught me that when I was younger, and she was right on the money with it. But right now, we're a bunch of older guys that when we get to the bus, hey, it's fun to get on that bus. It's like, all right, let's go. It's time to do this now. And we're like a bunch of guys with our hands in the cookie jar. Let's face it, man. I've spent my whole life singing for a living. Sometimes there wasn't much living. Sometimes during the early 80s, when we were like the biggest act in the business, there was so much money, sometimes it was laughable. Now we still make a good solid living. It wasn't like the early 80s. But we've been over every aspect of what the music business is and can be. We've still got our hands in the cookie jar because the bottom line is we're singing songs and making a living at it. We travel around the country like a gang. I was always a group guy. I love to have a lot of friends in Philly, man. You know, in my kind of rougher days, kind of cool to have the gang around. You know, you didn't go by yourself. It was 10 guys going there. You know what I'm saying? I like that. I'm still like that today. I get on the bus with a whole handful of guys, got a band and a crew. There's 20-some guys out there that are in this big Oak Ridge Boy bubble that travel all around the country, get on stage, set up everything, turn it on, and sing. What? And then have people applaud you. And it's not even like sports guys. You know, I've been with my friends in the Phillies, man, where guys, hey, you bum, you know, and you got your daughters there with you, and guys are cussing at you from up there, you know. And to me, people go, man, Oak Ridge Boy's cool. You know, they're like glad to see you. You know, people are always glad to see us. Hey, Oak Ridge Boys, man, good to see you guys, man. I've been following you since I was so-and-so. And, you know, when I was a kid, man, Elvira was my favorite song. Whatever. Yeah. It's a cool experience. It's good to be us.
Now, Joe, a minute ago you said that the group enjoyed great popularity in the early 80s. And that makes me think about something I read about recently. It was a turning point in the group's history. I guess it was in the 70s, where it was pretty much a gospel sound exclusively until I think it was Roy Clark's manager came up, gave you some advice. He said, you guys got to start singing some country.
That's right. We met Jim Halsey for the first time in '75. He's our godfather, our mentor, our spiritual advisor, our manager, the all-seeing, all-knowing. And he's still with us today. Huh? Bless his heart. He's in his 70s. Talk about energy. This guy's in his 70s, and I can't outrun him. He's unbelievable. But Jim Halsey is a visionary. And he heard the Oak Ridge Boys. It was a unique time. I write about this in the new Oaks book, American Journey. In 1975, we were starving to death. Johnny Cash was one of the few things helping us keep our head above water. Johnny would take us out with him, and we'd open for him, and he'd pay us more than we were worth, man. If you go to oakridgeboys.com right now, you'll see a tribute to Johnny Cash. There's one in my new book, too. But, because, you know, as we know, we just lost John. I've got an article, one of my commentaries on my website is called, what did I call it? The moon, what was it? Something about the moon. But it was all about Johnny Cash. I don't remember how I even started it with the moon. There was a big full moon coming up. I can't remember the title, but it's on a website. It's about Johnny. Johnny meant a lot to us. Jim Halsey, somebody somewhere like canceled a date, and they needed somebody to open up a few shows up north. And we were booked on the show, and Jim Halsey came out to see us. We were opening for Roy Clark, as you said. Right. Jim saw our group, and he met with us right after. He said, you know, you guys, that stage show is one of the most incredible things I've ever seen. The energy, the power, and the harmony. And gospel music's great. I love it. I don't see why you can't always sing some gospel. But I got to tell you, if you guys will branch out a little bit and start singing some country, you're 3 minutes away from being the biggest act in country music, meaning a hit record. We were on Columbia Records at the time. We were trying to walk the fence, singing songs about the sun and the moon and how beautiful everything life was, you know. Everything is beautiful, that kind of song. And we just weren't gaining any traction. We'd cut some really cool records, but Columbia didn't know what to do with us either. Yeah. Jim Halsey became our manager. So the first thing I need to do is we need to put you before people that matter. He started booking us out there in Las Vegas at the Landmark Hotel, 3 weeks in a row, showcasing Country Tonight. He would bring in all these kind of people to hear us. In the meantime, he got us off Columbia Records, signed us over with MCA. Got us a great producer named Ron Chansey, who produced most all of our early big hits. Put us together with Ron, put us together with MCA. We cut the Y'all Come Back Saloon album. Went with Roy Clark to Russia in '76, got tons of press out of it. We're on with the second musical entourage after Tennessee Ernie Ford to go behind the Iron Curtain and sing the
country music in Russia.
It was incredible. And Roy Clark with that banjo and fiddle just drove them. You know, I never saw nothing like that. And they never heard anything like us singing either. It was pretty cool. Well, in 1977, Y'all Come Back Saloon, the first single from the first MCA album came out, and it became a monster hit record. For the next 5 years, we had hit after hit after hit, 5 gold albums. We were winning all them big awards. And in '79, Kenny Rogers came into play. We went out with Kenny Rogers on the Full House tour. We were the hot new young act. Kenny was having big hits with Lucille and The Gambler. Right. Him and Dottie West were having hit duets. So on the Full House tour, 79 cities, big coliseums, it was Dottie West, the Oak Ridge Boys, and Kenny. And it was huge, and we learned so much from Kenny. Well, then Elvira came out, man, in '81. Elvira just took the world by storm. It took us from being a major country act to a household name.
Was that the crossover to the pop charts, would you say?
Oh, yeah, it was huge. It went everywhere. I mean, for a whole year, the whole country was singing Oom Papa Mau Mau with the Oak Ridge Boys. It became the 7th inning stretch. It became everything in this country. People of all ages, little kids. First song my little boy ever learned was Elvira. Well, man, and the cool thing was, and this may sound kind of off-center, but everybody knew it was us. We were doing enough television, enough Tonight shows, enough of all the big variety shows of the day, singing Elvira. Everybody equated the song with us. They still do.
Yeah.
So it became a big event. And then the next 3 years, we were able to do the Coliseum headlining tour. And we never sang to an empty seat for 3 years. And then we had Elvira, Thank God for Kids, Bobby Sue, Fancy Free, American Made. All these songs came out after Elvira. We're all huge. And it was a big run. It was great. It was really cool.
Now, I understand at one point you were on The Tonight Show during this popularity, and they offered you, well, 3 or 4 minutes to sit on the couch. You said, we'd rather sing instead of sit down and talk.
Yeah, that's true, Larry. We found out that Johnny Carson did not like talking to music groups. So it was one of his pet peeves. He hated it. He said Johnny Carson loved talking to comedians and movie actors, but when you got a music group over there on the couch, he didn't know who to talk to in a group, and he just didn't like it. So we found that out and said, hey, well, we'll make it easy for John. We won't sit on the couch. We'll just sing another song. And you know what? Carson loved us for it. And we did like 32 Tonight shows. I mean, Carson, it was always like, if our Dick Howard with the Jim Halsey Company at that time would call Johnny Carson, hey, the Oaks are coming out to L.A. They want to premiere their new single. What do you think? Book them. Oh, Mr. Freddie DeCordova, the famous producer there, he always said yes to the Oak Ridge Boys. So that's pretty cool. We've been on with Jay Leno a few times, too, over the years. But those days with Johnny Carson, they were special days. And they helped mold, I think, us into being that household name at the time that made everything grow. I mean, nothing was bigger than The Tonight Show. Of everything we've ever done, I've never been nervous except for The Tonight Show. When you're standing behind the curtain.
Because you knew that many people would be watching.
When you're standing behind that curtain and Johnny Carson's sitting in his chair, and that curtain's about to open, you're about to sing semi-live. I mean, they taped it at 5 in the afternoon, but they ran it like a live show, and then it delayed a couple hours and played. Palms sweated backstage, man. I've never been so scared as on The Tonight Show, man. It used to scare daylights out of me. I think it helped us do better. You know, when you're a little nervous, it
and that was a big mainstream acceptance. You saw what a big moment that was back then.
And when that crowd would go nuts on The Tonight Show and we were done singing, it was like, you'd think like, yay. We just put a big stone on the mountain, Mom. You know?
Well, bring us up to date, Joe. Today we're in Pittsburgh, and the Oaks are in town for a gig.
Yes, we sang for the National Rifle Association today. For the 3rd consecutive year, their big convention. 3 years ago, it was in Reno. 2 years ago, it was in Reno. Last year, Orlando, here in Pittsburgh. Next year, they're going to have us in Houston. So they really like the Oak Ridge Boys, you know. So it was really cool. We got to sing to the NRA folks today, and you know, lock and load, sing a bunch of good songs. And they really wanted us to come today and really sing some patriotic songs. And with the Color CD out there, we did. I sang G.I. Joe and Lily a little while ago. There, and I got a big standing ovation and a big response, as it always does. It's kind of cool to me that the book G.I. Joe and Lily's out. It's doing well. People are responding to it from every walk of life, and not only veterans who lived through World War II.
A lot of interest in World War II vets.
Yes, and then our young kids that are serving today have read the book. I did a book signing yesterday at Fort Campbell, and it's amazing how many young wives came up and said, I want to be to my husband like Lily was to G.I. Joe. That's pretty strong, man. You can't beat that. And my mother would love that, see. As much as she loves soldiers, if my mother realized that, I don't know how it works up there. I don't know the pecking order in heaven. I know she's there. She's waiting by the river, just like my song on the journey says. But I hope that on some level God lets her know that her life and this book and this song has been meaningful to young soldiers serving today. That would mean the world to my mother. That would probably mean more to her than anything, that the young kids serving today are reading about her and Daddy and being moved by it, being blessed by it.
Well, getting back to that book, Joe, G.I. Joe and Lily, the book that you recently had published, you had Barbara Bush do the foreword for it. So how did such a prominent American end up involved in writing that foreword for you?
The Oak Ridge Boys and George and Barbara Bush, President 41. Now, we know our president today pretty well, and we've, in fact, performed for him on several occasions. But we know George and Barbara Bush. We go way back to when he was vice president. We did a big show on the White House lawn for Ronald Reagan.
Oh, is that so?
Congressional barbecue. We became friends with the Bushes. They invite us up to Kennebunkport every year. A couple of years ago, we were sitting around a table up in Kennebunkport with the Bushes after dinner, and this is so like Barbara Bush. It's just the 4 of us, our wives, and George and Barbara. Barbara says, why don't each person talk a little bit about their parents? I told a little synopsis, a quick story of my parents. She was moved to tears by it. And she said, your mother was a remarkable woman. If you look at the back of G.I. Joe and Lily, I write a thank you to Barbara Bush, and I call her a remarkable woman because she is. And when I wrote my first manuscript to G.I. Joe and Lily, the first person I sent it to was her. And she loved the book. She said she was very moved by it. I kind of sucked it up and said, would you write a foreword for it, Barbara? She said, yes, I will. Wow, because I know so many people ask her. And I thought, if the answer is no, that's fine with me. I know, everybody asked you. No, I'd be honored. And she wrote the little foreword for the book, and there it is. Again, it's like I've told her, not only did I appreciate the fact that she wrote the foreword to the book, but what it also did to me was lended a lot of credibility to the work. Mm-hmm. And I think further honored my mother and father. And that's what that book's all about anyway. So that was just another honor, I think, to them and people like them. Mm-hmm. And the fact that Barbara Bush had that kind of heart and that understood it. Like she says in her foreword, I married a man in uniform too, and fell in love with him and married him. So she understood what G.I. Joe and Lily was all about. And I hope you get to read later on in the book when I talk about my mother, about the thank you to Barbara Bush. Because my mother was so sweet when she was dying. She said to me, do the Bushes know? I said, yeah, Mom, the Bushes know. It meant a lot to her that the Bushes knew that she was dying. Because my mother knew she was dying. Diabetes had really taken its toll on her there in the last days. And my mother was just as sweet in death as she was in life. Just incredible woman.
Now, Joe, getting back to the Oaks, having performed with them for over 30 years now, how do you keep the material itself fresh?
Well, new material is the key. Again, we've had these new albums out, this new album coming out with this new stuff on it. We've had new material always brightens your day. It's new creativity, to go back to what we first started talking about. And creativity is the key behind anything. And new songs keep you fresh, keep you creative. But we've never had a problem with the old songs. I read Don Henley of the Eagles one time said, to sing in a group like this that has had success, you have to have an amazing capacity for repetition. I thought, well, that's very true though, Don, coming from a guy that's toured 4 times in his whole life. So imagine the capacity for repetition we have. How many times have I sang Leaving Louisiana in the Broad Daylight?
And 100 and some gigs per year.
Oh, yeah. Sail Away, Elvira. We've sung it more times than there are light years to Nebula, for crying out loud. But for some reason, for us, it just, every song marks a particular point in time. Mm-hmm. We've been around a long time. We sing Sail Away, and I think of 79. We sing Y'all Come Back Saloon, I think of 1977. All of a sudden,
so you get nostalgic with the music too, as well as some fans do, of course.
Exactly. It marks time for them. It marks time for me. Talked to a young soldier today over at the NRA who was talking about how much a song we had out called It's Gonna Take a Lot of River meant to him in 1987. So, well, how cool, man. I remember it well, because the song equates to the time period. That song meant a lot to him. Well, if I happen to sing It's Gonna Take a Lot of River on stage, makes me think of 87 too. And in fact, that may be the only thing I remember of 1987. What else is there to remember about 87? But anyway, but theoretically, the songs take you back and they mark time. It's not hard to get excited about singing songs that were hit records. And again, I'm lucky to be in a group where everybody feels like that. Mm-hmm. It's a team thing. Everybody feels that way. We all don't mind singing any song that we put on the set list, man. And we change up our set list night after night. We try to reflect different songs, different nights. And maybe tonight we'll do a few different songs, some colors than we did the night before. Maybe tonight we'll do a few hits we hadn't done in a few shows. We'll put them on the show tonight, keep it fresh. And so, we play little games with ourselves too to keep it fresh and new. And, when you're away from home, you spend all day long, say, in Galveston, Texas, and you take a walk and you do a little writing and you check your email and you surf around the internet and then take another walk and practice your banjo. Mm-hmm. The reason you're in Galveston and call home, check the Philly scores, which hasn't been pleasant here in the beginning of the season, but the key is that night when the lights go down and then the stage lights come up and it's, ladies and gentlemen, the legendary Oak Ridge Boys. I mean, you go out there and start pounding. That's what you're there for.
When you hear that, do you throw a switch on? When do you get really excited about going out on stage?
It doesn't really change. There's not really a switch.
Is that so?
It's just like you roll out there, but now it's time to do this. We got a phrase in our group. Let's do this now. It's time to do this. We'll come off stage and go, well, that was that. Now tomorrow's something else. That's the way we kind of run things. But that reason, that 90 minutes or 2 hours, hour and 45, that's why we've been in Galveston all day. Mm-hmm. If you can't get up for a theater full of people that have paid their hard-earned money to come out and still come out to hear the Oak Ridge Boys stand in a row and sing their songs with our kicking band, there's something wrong with you if that can't get you going. It's not a problem. Not a problem.
Now-
We have a great capacity for repetition.
That's what Henley said.
Mr. Henley, yes.
We talked about your being brought up, you were born in Philadelphia,
Right.
raised in Philadelphia. Now
Yes,
you
sir.
live in Tennessee. When did you relocate?
When I joined the Oak Ridge Boys were in Tennessee. I lived in.
Had a hunch.
I lived in Philly till I was 19. My parents always lived there till they went to the Soldiers' Home. You have to read the book to find out that story. But I lived in Harrisburg for about a year and a half. Camp Hill, to be exact. Mechanicsburg, right around there. Then I moved to Buffalo and lived in Buffalo for about 5 years. Moved to Nashville, Tennessee in October '73. I want to tell you something about Tennessee. I love the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. I loved growing up in Philly. I would have had it no other way. I didn't grow up easy. We didn't have a whole lot, but nobody else did anyway, so what did you miss? I had friends, I had family. I learned how to get along with a lot of different kinds of people. You know, we live in a day and age now where everybody's so afraid to offend each other and everybody's hyphenated and everybody, hey, in my neighborhood, there were Irish kids, there were black kids, there were German kids, there were Jewish kids, there was Catholic kids here, and there were Protestant kids here. And we all somehow melted. Was it Dennis Miller one night said, hey, we're supposed to be the great melting pot. Well, melt for crying out loud, okay?
Melt already.
Well, you know, melt already. My neighborhood, we did melt. We were all for one and one for all, man. Everybody mattered in our neighborhood, and we were friends, and we'd stick up for one another. And maybe some guys over in the other neighborhood we might be mad at today. But let somebody come in and try to put down Philly. I used to picture everybody gathering up like one big old army, man, with Eagles helmets on, walking down the street brandishing soft pretzels in one hand and a cheesesteak in the other, man, and we'll take you on. If Baltimore decided to invade Philadelphia, my money's on Philly. Okay? Well, it always felt that way to me, and I loved growing up in Philadelphia for all those reasons, which I think were important. But I do love the rolling hills of Tennessee. Got to tell you, I've said many times, I could go back and live in Philly tomorrow. Live here in Pittsburgh, great city. Look at them 2 new ballparks. I mean, Philly's got 2 new ballparks. I haven't even seen them yet.
Right.
But
How often do you visit the old neighborhood in Philly, Joe?
I haven't very much since my parents died. My sister still lives in Cherry Hill, New Jersey, and I still get up to see her on occasion, but not like I did when my parents were still here. I really don't. I need to go up there. There's a little article on my website called, one of my many commentaries at josephsbonsall.com called A Trip Back Home. It talks about a trip I took back into the old neighborhood in the last couple of years. It's pretty interesting. But I don't get back there as often as I'd like. But I have to tell you, as I say, I think I could live in Philly again. I could live in New York, Boston. I like to think I'm a big boy now. I've been around the blocks. I could move back anywhere. But at the same time, I think it might take a burning bush experience to drag my old Philly boy hide out of the rolling hills of Tennessee. I love living in Tennessee. It's right there in the Mid-South. We get all 4 seasons. And my wife and I have a beautiful property right on the Kentucky-Tennessee line. The nearest person's 3.5 miles away. It's 400 acres. And man, I'll tell you, it's just like, I've been so inspired there so many times. I've written things there. It's been really nice living in Tennessee. I still love Philly. It's my heart. By my heart, I'm a Philly guy. I'm still there from Jasper and Tioga Street there in North Philly, you know. I grew up in Philly. I love these people you meet. Oh, I'm from Philadelphia. I'm from media. That ain't Philadelphia. It's media.
That's why they call it media.
I grew up in Philly, man. I grew up in Philly, right there with the alley cats and the cockroaches, man. And I'm glad that I did. But I do love living in Tennessee.
Joe, we just have about a minute left. What else would you like to accomplish, well, professionally or personally, with the Oaks or without the Oaks?
I want to continue to write. I do enjoy writing. G.I. Joe and Lily's been an incredible blessing to me.
You going to write some more kids' books?
I would like to write more Molly the Cat books. I would like to do that, I think. I'm really happy about this book I've written on the Oak Ridge Boys, and I'm pretty sure it's going to come out this year. So I hope that happens. I'd like to write more. I'm thinking about writing an autobiographical type book, kind of like G.I. Joe and Lily, but more this time from my standpoint. And actually write it maybe with me there more about how I got from A to B to C, maybe how I got from those streets in Philadelphia to being an Oak Ridge boy. I think that would be an interesting journey to write about. But for the most part, man, I'm very, very happy. I have a wonderful wife, 2 wonderful daughters. They're both married to 2 good, hard-working young American boys. I've got a couple of grandkids that I adore. And God has granted me health and the ability to sing in a true American music group with history that goes back to 1945. He's enabled me to write a book and honor my parents. How many people get to do that? I feel pretty blessed.
Joe Bonsall is a member of the Oak Ridge Boys vocal group. We've been talking to him. Thank you very much for your time, Joe.
I'm honored to talk to you, Larry. Thank you for taking the time and giving me the opportunity. I appreciate it.